Hey y'all, Zapper the Yapper here. Currently, I'm a Mortal 3 286RR, and I'm racing to beat the banana to Radiant. If I do, who knows? Maybe I'll do some free coaching? I don't know. Today I put together 10 crosshair placement tips. Some of these are super unique, and if you already know everything in this video, you're probably the GOAT. Number 1. Head height. Yes, obviously you need your crosshair at head height. However, in practice, it can be hard to maintain head height. This is because depending on the distance and elevation between you and the enemy, the height you need your crosshair at can change drastically. It's a simple concept to understand, but it will take a lot of practice to intuitively know what head height will be in niche scenarios. Something as simple as the enemy peeking far from the wall versus close to the wall can change the height of the head by a significant margin. Number 2. When holding angles, the distance you hold your crosshair from the wall should be dynamic depending on the situation you find yourself in. In simple terms, to hold for a wide swing, keep your crosshair farther from the wall. For a close peek, keep it closer to the wall. This part's easy. In practice, it can be harder to predict which peek the enemy will use. A rule of thumb I like to use, which works not all the time, but most of the time, is this. If you're holding from an off angle, or if the enemy is making a lot of noise, you should hold wide. If the enemy is making little to no noise, you should hold close. This will cover most situations you find yourself in, but just remember that even your reaction time changes from day to day. This means depending on how well rested or focused you are, you might benefit from holding angles differently. This could be closer if your reaction time is really quick, or wider if your reaction time is feeling a little slow. This can help with consistency from day to day with those constantly changing reaction times. Number 3. If the enemy is jump peeking an angle, let's just say they've done it a few times in a row, hold for the jump peek. Try holding your crosshair a little bit higher and a little closer to the wall so that if they do it again, they'll be jumping right into your crosshair for a free kill. The only risk here is if they dry peek you while you're doing this. In this case, you're going to get destroyed. So just be careful, but as long as they don't know you're there, this probably won't happen. When people are jump peeking, they're usually playing for info and not usually playing for a kill. So yeah. Number 4. This tip is sort of aim related, but it's super helpful. If you find your crosshair placement to be a little low when the enemy peeks you, put a little extra effort into getting your crosshair to head height. Obviously, you still want to aim at them horizontally, but think of it this way. Once you get your crosshair to head height, there's only 2 directions the enemy can realistically move, left and right. This means simply by getting your crosshair to the correct level, the chances of the enemy just doing the aiming for you by walking into your crosshair increase by a very large amount. A simple rule of thumb for this would be that it's better to miss to the left and right of the enemy than it is to miss above and below. Keeping your aim on the x-axis will simplify the aiming process and make gunfights easier for you. Number 5. Have a hard time hitting jumping enemies? No problem. Instead of flicking and trying to hit their head mid-air, just pre-aim your crosshair closer to where they're going to land. What goes up must come down, so if you're struggling to hit the enemy mid-air, there's really nothing wrong with simplifying the aiming process for yourself. Not to mention, the enemy can't really shoot you while they're in the air, so taking the extra time to line up the shot is honestly just better in most cases. Obviously, if you're getting jumped at with a judge or jet knives, this changes drastically. Number 6. Are you the one jumping? In a similar way, you should prepare your crosshair for when you land. Instead of trying to track the enemy the entire time you're falling, try lining it up above them so that once you hit the ground, your crosshair falls into place. You can't shoot them in the air anyways, so you might as well spend the extra time preparing for when you can actually shoot back. Number 7. When clearing angles while walking, please don't put your crosshair on the wall. Your crosshair should be tracking just a little ways away from the wall to compensate for your reaction time. This method of clearing is best when you have angle advantage, and it's because you're relying on the fact that you'll see the enemy first because you're farther from the wall than they are. Relating back to the angle holding tip, if you're walking around the map but you hear the enemy running at you, please adjust your crosshair accordingly. If you know someone is about to be running around the corner, feel free to hold your crosshair a little wider to compensate for their increased move speed. Number 8. When peeking angles, you're going to want to pre-aim your crosshair into the wall. It's like the opposite of the last one. But by doing this, you're not only preemptively making the aiming process easier for yourself by the time the gunfight starts, but you're also maximizing your move speed. And why are you doing that? Well, the reason is because you're perpendicular to the angle you're peeking. It's like simple mathematics shit, look it up, trust me. You can tell if you're doing this right because your crosshair should end up exactly where you're expecting the enemy to be without having to move your mouse at all. That is after you're exposed to the angle and all that shit. Number 9, just thought of this tip right now, but I haven't even tried it yet, to be honest. And in theory, it should be good. I'm sure people already do this, so, you know, maybe I'm dumb. Most of the enemies you encounter are gonna be moving, right? So when aiming at them, you should position your crosshair ahead of the direction they're moving. This simplifies the aiming process because the enemy will basically do the aiming for you. Just aim in front of the direction that they're currently moving and they'll cross right through your crosshair. Then all you gotta do is click as they pass through. You could argue this is an aiming trick, and it kind of is, but it's basically a tip on where to put your crosshair during a gunfight, so it's kind of like crosshair placement, I don't know. Number 10, similar to the last tip, you can use your own movement to aim if you position your crosshair accordingly. Moving to the right, aim your crosshair slightly to the left of the enemy, and then stop and shoot as your crosshair passes over them. Yeah, I know, this is basically Woohoojin's aiming thing, but it's good advice, so definitely try it out if you haven't before. Doing when you pre-aim into the wall before peeking an angle. If doing this before a fight is good, it's probably pretty good to do during a fight as well. Number 11. Extra tip for you beautiful people, that's right. This one is a little more complex and confusing, and it's kind of a movement tip too. So part of the reason you pre-aim into the wall before peeking is because you're moving the fastest when perpendicular to the angle you're peeking. I said this before, but essentially this means that if you're peeking the wrong angle, you're actually going to be moving slower than you think. Yeah, confusing, right? However, I know for a fact that you've had times where you peeked an angle, you thought you did it perfectly, but you still get insta-killed. Chances are, this is what happened. Let's say you're behind the wall, you're peeking out to the left, and then after you expose yourself to the angle, your crosshair is too far to the right of the enemy. You're going to be moving closer to walking speed, you didn't even know it. And depending on how sharp the angles are, it can make a surprising difference even if your crosshair doesn't seem that far off on your screen. This is a big reason why off angles are so strong. Not only does it make good crosshair placement harder for your enemy, but their move speed will look slower on your screen, making them an easy target. It's important to keep this in mind when clearing off angles because it changes the approach a little bit. I won't go too far into specifics, but a wide swing with good pre-aim is usually the best for clearing off angles. Anyways, that's it for today. Hope y'all learned something new and helpful. Later.